a real breakthrough for me as a bread baker was realizing that slow rising bread always seems to be better tasting than fast rising bread. I had to ask myself the question, why? And this is the results of that inquiry, is that we talk about fermentation being a biological activity of yeast and bacteria working on the ingredients. Well, while the yeast and bacteria is working on the ingredients, there are also enzymes that naturally occur. Yeast carries its own enzymes. Flour carries its own enzymes. Sometimes enzymes can be added into flour in the form of malted barley. Malted barley has loaded with maltose, which is an enzyme in its own right. And what enzymes do is that they go into ingredients like starches and proteins, and they break them apart to make them more digestible by they're designed by nature to go in and find the twigs or branches where the sugars that are the foundation of those ingredients kind of have little twigs and branches that can be broken off. And those twigs, in the case of starch, flour from wheat, let's say, you have sucrose, you have glucose, you have levulose and dextrose, you have maltose. Those are all sugars. And each of them have flavor profiles. But when they're all tied together in a starch molecule, they're so complexly woven that they just slide off your tongue and they taste like starch. They don't taste like sugar. But when you take that teaspoon of flour in your mouth, you're actually in potential taking a teaspoon of sugar in your mouth. It's just that it functions differently until those sugars are broken out, and they're broken out through enzyme activity that then allow these microorganisms to feed on the sugars, because yeast and bacteria eat sugars, especially glucose, the simplest of all sugars, a single chain sugar. Sucrose is a double chain sugar. It's glucose and fructose, and it's a little bit harder for an organism to digest a double. It's twice the size. He can't get his mouth around that double size sugar. It has to wait for fructose for the fructose and glucose to separate, and so they're no longer sucrose. Now it's glucose and fructose. Now the yeast can actually eat that, and the bacteria can eat it. So these things take time. The hearth is at the heart of cooking and sharing food with others. Let Forno Bravo provide the hearth and heart for your culinary journey. And what happens is that to try to make bread rise faster, we add more yeast. Well, the yeast is going to eat whatever sugars it can get, but not all the sugars have had time to be broken out from the starch complexity. And so that branch of starch with all its twigs is still, lots of twigs are left on there sliding off our tongue and not tasting sweet. So if our goal as a baker is to evoke the full potential of flavor trapped in that grain, we do it by allowing enough time for the maximum amount of sugar breakout to take place without totally destroying the starch molecule, because we still need the starch to provide the body of the bread. It has to gelatinize. So if we get all the sugars out of there and it just turns into sugar, it caramelizes and it can be tasting a little gummy, but on the inside, the outside will caramelize and become a crust. The sugars inside are more of a gumminess. You need some starch. It's a balancing act. Baking bread is a balancing act. And what you want is the right timing to release maximum sugar and retain the proper amount of starch to gelatinize. That's, again, a drama that we don't have to understand it all scientifically, because we follow recipes that get us there. But this is the drama that's going on inside that product while we're casually doing the other things that we have to do, like turning on the oven and getting our pans ready and dividing and shaping and going through the 12 stages of bread making. Underneath all of this, the drama of fermentation is creating flavor. And ultimately, what cooking is about is delivering flavor to the consumer. And the person who delivers the most flavor wins. So that's just another piece of the fermentation puzzle. And it's one of the reasons why slow rising bread tastes better, is because more flavor has been evoked from the grain before it goes to the oven for the final transformation, which is baking. And then we get to taste it as bread, not as dough. I'm Peter Reinhardt, and this episode is brought to you by my friends at Forno Bravo.